Alrighty, everyone, welcome back. So it's day 2 of 3 for a little mini-series here, looking at each division and seeing which one's the most difficult, but this is more of a Western Conference outlook, I guess. So, again, as I literally just said, we're going to be taking a look at the Western Conference, the overall wild card race, look at the top 3 teams for each division, and then just everyone else. So, should be a pretty fun video. Now, one thing that I've noticed with the West compared to the East is I feel like when you look at the overall schedule and when you look at the overall top end talent, it's a easier conference or an easier two divisions than it is the Eastern Conference. Not to say that these divisions are difficult, but they are definitely much easier when you look at just the overall stats from the others. You may disagree. You can let me know in the comments down below, but this is what I personally think. So I'm not going to waste any more time here. We're going to get straight into it here by looking at the top 3 teams in the Central Division to start off. So, believe it or not, as of right now, the top 3 for the Central is actually really close. It's a 1-point difference between each team. So, it's going to change probably tonight. By the time you watch this video, and whether you watch this video today or Friday or the following day, you're going to tell that it changes. It's definitely going to change a lot. So right now, number 1 is the Winnipeg Jets with a 19-9-3 record for 41 points. They have the 28th hardest schedule, so I believe the 5th easiest schedule in the NHL when you look at that. And one thing you're going to notice too is that for the large majority of these Western Conference teams, they have easier schedules than the Eastern Conference teams. Why? Because they're in the West. That's pretty much all there is to say. So the Winnipeg Jets have been, I'm going to say it, they've been a wagon. They really have. Because before the season started, people didn't think they'd be this good, but they are. They're playing pretty well in the first half of the year. Now, we saw this last year. It feels different than last year, though. And I've honestly just stopped doubting them because every time I doubt the Winnipeg Jets, they seem to just prove me wrong and do really well. So we'll see how the second half of the season is because obviously last year they did really well in the first half. Then they just did not do well in the second half and then ended up losing in the first round. Might as well have gotten swept, but they lost in the first round. But yeah, hopefully Winnipeg, they keep this going. They've been really enjoyable to watch, and last night's win against Detroit was a big one, and definitely they're going to need it if they want to get first in this Central Division. Next up then, tied with the third place team is the Dallas Stars. The Stars are 18-8-4 for 40 points. They have the 29th hardest schedule or the 4th easiest schedule in the NHL. So, you look at Dallas, obviously they're a really good team. The offense is good. However, Ottinger's out, though. That is a little bit of a concern I do have. However, it's not as bad as we thought. He's still week to week, but it's not as bad as we thought. So maybe in the next couple of weeks we might see a little bit of a trend downwards from Dallas. No disrespect to Wedgwood whatsoever, but Ottinger, when he's good, oh man, he can keep the team in games. And, Dallas sometimes has the tendency of relying on Ottinger a lot. So definitely him being out's a little bit of a worry. I think Wedgwood's a good backup goalie, though, and can be suitable. But right now it's going to probably be Matt Murray and him for the tandem for the foreseeable future until Ottinger eventually comes back. But he should come back soon. The hope is. But yeah, Dallas, overall, still a really competitive team. Made the conference finals last year. They're definitely a team that they're going to be in it this year, as they usually are. The Colorado Avalanche are third in the Central Division with a 19-11-2 record for 40 points. They had the 9th hardest schedule. I believe they're the hardest schedule of all the Western Conference teams, and that's kind of puts them at a severe disadvantage. Now, Devon Tays came out a few days ago after their loss to the Blackhawks, saying that there are players on the team that think they're playing well, but they're actually not. And that is a little bit of a concern that I do have. Because, maybe you look at some of the players on the Avalanche team and you say, well, they may be putting up points, but they're not playing the way they should be. And there are definitely players who have struggled notably. I'm not going to call out any names here, but it's shown in the past 10 games. They're 4-5-1. It shows that, they're struggling and they're losing to teams they should be beating. They should have beat Chicago and beat them pretty well. So, definitely that's a team you should be you should be taking down. And those are losses you really can't afford if you want to get first and a home ice advantage in the Central Division. So definitely that plays a factor with me. But obviously, they have enough top end talent to where they are a playoff team. They're not going to fall out of the playoffs. They actually have a pretty good cushion on the wild card team that's next. So definitely they have a pretty solid lead on the other teams, and they should be a playoff team. But obviously, it's an 82-game season. Some teams go through this. It's not uncommon, so we'll see if Colorado can pull themselves out of this. I'm sure they can. I'm sure they're a good team. They can do it for sure. Next up, then, we'll move into the Pacific Division and their top three teams. Then we'll just get into everyone else. So starting off here with the Stanley Cup champions and the team that I am wearing currently, the Vegas Golden Knights. The Golden Knights are 21-7-5 for 47 points. They have the 21st hardest schedule. It feels weird saying it that way, but they do have the 21st hardest schedule. Vegas, there's no doubt. They're waiting for playoffs pretty much. However, Vancouver could be competing with them for that first place spot. So there is a little bit of a, not really a worry, but there's a little bit of a, keep that in mind type factor there. And definitely Vegas, they're in a good enough spot where, I'm not worried about it. They're still a really good hockey team. They're going to go and make the playoffs and probably do well this year. They seem to always do. They're very well coached. I don't even think their team's really that good on paper, and that's no disrespect to their team whatsoever. I think they're just really well coached by Bruce Cassidy, and I think the system overall just works, and that's why they're such an effective team. But yeah, Vegas, they're a great team. They won the Stanley Cup last year, and they showed that is a prime example of the Eastern Conference can just beat each other up and over there in the East. And Vegas will just clear off the West and wait for the finalists. That's pretty much what they did last year. I'm not going to lie to you. So, yeah, Vegas number one. Vancouver, though, is not far behind at number two. They're 22-9-2 for 46 points. They have the 12th hardest schedule. I believe the second hardest of all the Western Conference teams. Definitely, I think that the Canucks have really surprised a lot of people. I didn't think they'd be this good. I'm not gonna lie to you. I honestly thought they would be kind of where like the Oilers are right now. I'm not gonna lie, because that's just how they start off. It's hard to really trust this team when every year they've just had slow starts. But this year definitely hasn't been a slow start. The team has seemed to click really well under Rick Tocchet. Even though there are some looming questions that I do still have, I think the team overall is playing really well, and they're definitely a team that a lot of fans, when their team misses the playoffs, are going to bandwagon off of. Not just because they're a Canadian team, but because they're really fun to watch. Definitely that plays a factor there too. So yeah, Vancouver, I'm really looking forward to them hopefully come playoff time if they're still in that spot. Next up then, the Los Angeles Kings. And the Kings, even though they are 6 points behind the Canucks for second place in the division, they do have a severe advantage because they have the easiest schedule in the NHL. They are 18-7-4 for 40 points. As I mentioned, they have the easiest schedule in the league. There are a few concerns that I do have with LA. The ability to come back in games sometimes is something that I'm concerned about. I think the last night's loss to the Kraken was a little bit of an issue. Definitely, though, it could be just a one-off. But the home record's a little bit with me. The road record's great. They've won 13 of the first 15 road games they played. They're a very good team on the road. So I'm going to say that if they're playing against the team on the road in the playoffs, yeah, they're going to be very difficult to beat if they go far. So LA, another sneaky pick there in that Pacific Division. The top three is very strong. After that, though, it's kind of a little bit of a very weak division when you look at it overall. So the wild cards, compared to the Eastern Conference, they probably won't change for a little bit because there is a pretty sizable gap between the second wild card spot and the team that is trying to compete with that wild card spot. Unless, if obviously that second wild card team starts falling off and losing games, which once we mention that, it's going to be very possible that that could happen to that team. So we'll start off here with the Nashville Predators. And the Predators are another team in that division, in that conference, that has been a wagon. They are 18-14-0 for 36 points. They have the 22nd hardest schedule in the NHL. Nashville, it feels like we thought at the beginning of the year they weren't going to be this good, but with the overall roster they have, it's not that great of a roster. Not to say that it's disrespecting Nashville whatsoever, but the roster just isn't that like there's not a whole lot of top end talent, but I feel like Andrew Brunette's done a good job at coaching this team. I feel like Stars has kept them in a lot of games too, and I think some of the younger players like Philip Forsberg and Luke Evangelista have done a really good job as well. Not Forsberg, he's not young, but he's really carried this Predators team. He will get some hard votes. I think there's without a doubt he's going to get some because it seems like every game I watch with Nashville, Forsberg's playing a massive role in it. So definitely Nashville's been a wagon. They are 4 points behind the Avalanche for third place in that Central Division, so they do have a little bit of ground to make up. But obviously, they're still in a really good spot right now, and I think they'll probably stay as a playoff team, unless if something really big happens. Next up, then, the Arizona Coyotes. Yeah, the Coyotes are in that second wildcard spot. 16, 13, and 2 for 34 points. They have the 17th hardest schedule in the league, so they're just pretty much right in the middle there. So, for those who don't know, I am a Flyers fan, but I'm also a Coyotes fan. When the Flyers aren't good, I'll root for the Coyotes, but when they're not, the both of them are not good. But regardless, they both look pretty solid this year. Arizona, I didn't have a lot of expectations with heading into this year. Mainly because, obviously, like a lot of people, I thought myself that they were just going to miss again, and they were a team that was going to get better, but not playoff better. But they look like they can be a playoff team. However, I do have a little bit of concern with this team. I think that they're still struggling to find some consistency. I watch in December and November, we have like 500 records pretty much. December's been a better month for us, but I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the month we're 16-16. Would not surprise me. And I feel like, honestly, we very well could be. That is something that I do look at with the Arizona Coyotes. They're struggling with some consistency. The goaltending's been great, but if we are in this spot come the trade deadline, I wouldn't be surprised if the Coyotes decide, hey, we might need to sell. We might need to move some players. And I think, again, a big name that comes up is Vejmelka. He's a big name that I see coming. So we'll see if he stays. But yeah, Arizona, right now they're in a playoff spot. We'll see how long that lasts. Now, as I mentioned, there is a decent gap, not a huge gap, but a decent gap between the second wildcard spot team and the teams that are trying to catch that second wildcard spot. Starting off with the St. Louis Blues. It's a three-way tie with 31 points. The Blues are one of those teams. They're 15, 15, and 1 for 31 points, as I just mentioned. They have the 13th hardest schedule in the NHL, or the third hardest one in the West. The Blues, they're just kind of in the middle right now. And again, I've said this in videos, I've said this everywhere, that the Blues are one of those teams where it's like, it's pretty much unpredictable. Like, they could be, they could win a game, they could lose a game. You have no idea what to expect from St. Louis heading into every single game. They could win, they could lose, they could win, they could lose. Sometimes it is that. They'll win, they'll lose, they'll win, they'll lose. It's like here and there. They can't really seem to get consistency going. And that is something that they are battling with. Whether or not you think Berube being fired is the right move, they're still trying to find that consistency. I think things have gone a little bit better since Berube's left, but obviously there still is that looming factor of, will this team still be a playoff team? I think right now it's a no. I think that Arizona and other teams have played better than them. So that is a factor that I do have there. Sorry about that. But yeah, there are a few teams that I think that, St. Louis isn't better than, and I think that, they might get passed here by some other teams. Speaking of which, the Calgary Flames, they're 13, 14, and 5 for 31 points. They have the 25th hardest schedule in the NHL. I don't know. With Calgary, they're a little weird for me because they started off the year terrible. Now they're good. Then they were kind of meh again. Now they're starting to get a little bit better. They're, again, another one of those teams that is just in the middle. Like, you don't know really what to expect from them from night to night. It's really strange there with the Flames. I do like Connor Zary. I do like the way he's playing. I think that the offense still leaves something to be desired. The Huberdeau deal, we're going to be talking about that for the next 8 years. That has got to be probably the worst deal we've seen. It has been a horrible outcome for Calgary with the amount of money he signed. And again, I've talked to many of these before saying, oh, well, they didn't really have much of a choice. They really didn't. But, obviously, that is something I do keep in mind with Calgary, the Huberdeau deal. And I think that I don't know if they'll be a playoff team until that's done. I don't know if I can see it right now with the Flames. Next up then, the Seattle Kraken. The Kraken are 11, 14, and 9 for 31 points. They have the 27th hardest schedule in the league, or the 6th easiest, I think. I think that's how math works. But obviously, with the Kraken, I look at them and I say, well, they're getting enough points to really keep themselves in it. Are they a team that necessarily is a playoff team? Probably not. I think last year was a little bit of, I don't want to say a fluke year, but it was a year that, obviously there was a few teams that probably missed out that maybe should have made it, and Seattle reluctantly made it over them. But obviously, we'll see if the Kraken can turn this around. They did win last night against the Kings, but obviously that could just be a fluke game. We'll find out here, but, Seattle, they really can't afford to go on 8-game losing streaks either. They were on an 8-game losing streak until a few days ago. So definitely that is a concern that I do have with the Kraken. And the hope is that, things will get better for them. That's all I'm going to say with Seattle. That's it for the tie. Next up, then you got the Minnesota Wild. They are 13-13-4 for 30 points. They have the 24th hardest schedule. The Wild are still in it. I wouldn't say they're out of it just yet. But obviously, they kind of dug themselves a hole that's too big to get out of. And we'll say the same for the next team that's up. But the Wild, obviously, there are a few concerns that I do have. It looks like the team's gotten better under Hines, but there still is a few concerning factors that I do have with this team and the overall roster that I don't know. And, obviously the salary cap, we got to talk about that with Minnesota every time. So, obviously I do think of that, but we'll see. We'll see, though. We'll see if they're a playoff team. And I think that with Minnesota and the next team that I'm about to mention, the Oilers, being out of the playoffs, it's going to put in 2 or 3 teams that really maybe shouldn't be in it if the Wild and the Oilers are playing the way they would be. But obviously, you look at this is definitely interesting now that the Wild and the Oilers have kind of fallen out of the race a little bit. So speaking of which, the Edmonton Oilers are up next. They played 13-15-1 for 27 points. They have the 26th hardest schedule. I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to say it's too late, but it might be. They are like 7 points out of the Coyotes. So definitely that plays a factor with me. I'm a little bit worrisome if they're going to be able to come back from this. If there was a team that would, it's the Oilers, but they won 8 games, they got close, then they're starting to lose again. So honestly, I don't really know what to expect with them anymore. The hope is that they'll start picking up a few more wins, but they are on the East Coast for a little bit here, so that's going to be difficult for them. Then they go home, host Philadelphia. I know they play a game against them. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with the Oilers, but I would say those are the teams that are still in it. These last bottom 3 teams are the teams that I'd say, well, yeah, I guess they're still in it technically, but not really. They're not really gonna make it. The first team is Anaheim. They are 12-19-0 for 24 points. They have the 3rd easiest schedule. It feels like, I don't want to say things have gone, I don't know. It feels like they've gotten a little bit better, but I'm not entirely too sure with Anaheim. It feels like every year they're just at the bottom of the league and struggling. This is a year where they're supposed to get a little bit better, but they didn't. They're still one of the worst teams in the league. But honestly, they got another high draft pick this year, adding on to Carlson and all the other guys they have. They really can build a really talented roster in a few more years. I hate to say that for Anaheim, but they can build a really talented roster. But just right now, it's not looking too good for them. But obviously, we'll find out with Anaheim. But hopefully, things will get better. The Chicago Blackhawks, I mentioned Chicago plenty of times. There's really nothing else outside of Connor Bedard. They are 10-20-1 for 21 points. They have the 15th hardest schedule. Doesn't really matter. They're not in the race. They're pretty much waiting for the draft again. They could get another high draft pick. It's very possible they get a guy like Celebrini. I know the hockey world will lose their minds, but it's very possible they could get him. But, I look at Chicago. They're pretty much just where they're supposed to be. Bedard's playing pretty well. He's won them some games they probably shouldn't have won. Like the Colorado game, he played really well against Colorado. But obviously, we'll see if that continues. But yeah, Chicago, they're still where they're supposed to be. That's all I'm going to say. And then finally, the San Jose Sharks, they're also where they're supposed to be. They are 9-20-3 for 21 points. They have the 2nd easiest schedule in the NHL. As I mentioned with the Sharks, obviously they're a team that they're where they're supposed to be. They're not in a good spot, which is where we thought they'd be. But people thought they'd be the worst team ever, and they would only won 5 games up to this point. They've won 9. They played a really well spoiler role in the previous couple of games. So definitely they're still playing solid. They're playing with what they have to, but they're just waiting for the draft. They're waiting for Celebrini and all those guys in the next upcoming draft. Excuse me. So yeah, that is a look at the Western Conference. That is video 2 of 3 in this series. Tomorrow, you're probably wondering what it's going to be about because I really didn't look at one division specifically. We're going to look at all 4 divisions and see if we can rank them from hardest to easiest. I'm sure it's pretty obvious when you look at the divisions overall, but we're going to go into it anyways. But anyways, that'll do it for me. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like. Hit the subscribe button down below. I would greatly appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts on some of these teams in the comments down below. And again, anything can change. I can make this video in March, and the Coyotes could be out of it. The Oilers could be in it. The Canucks could be in a wild card spot. The Flames could be like second in the division. Who knows? Anything can really happen in the NHL. But regardless, let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Adios.